Imagine waking up in the kingdom where everyone is almost dead. Nobody tells you what has happened. The king is missing. The citizens have become monsters. A mysterious infection is spreading. And deep beneath the kingdom, something is waiting. But here is the terrifying part. You are not the hero who have come to save the kingdom. You are one of the reasons the story existed in the first place. Because beneath this beautiful world of Hallownest lies a story about a king, a forgotten god, and thousands of sacrificed children, and a being called Radiance. So let's uncover the story of Hollow Knight. Long before the night arrived, Hallownest was one of the greatest kingdoms in the underground world. But it wasn't like this. The creatures here were simple bugs, each living according to their own instincts. Then come mysterious being known as the Pale King. The Pale King was one giant WIRM worm, but he could transform himself into a small godlike figure and establish himself the ruler of the new civilization. And he gives the bugs something incredibly important: higher thought. The creatures gained intelligence. They could communicate, they could build, they could create art, technology, cities, and eventually an entire kingdom. Hallownest flourished. The city of Tyr became the magnificent capital, and the great warriors protected the kingdom. Different tribes lived throughout the land. There were tribes like Mantis tribes, mushroom tribes, and for a while everything seems to be perfect. But there was a problem. Pale King wasn't the first powerful being ruled this land, because long before Hallownest, another being was worshipped here, the Radiance, and that being had not forgotten. The Radiance was an ancient higher being connected to the Moth Tribes. The Moth worships her. She was the part of their identity. But when the Pale King arrived and gave inhabitants the higher thought, something changed. The Moth abandoned their old god. They forgot about Radiance, and instead they began following the Pale King. To people of the Hallownest, the Radiance became nothing but more than a forgotten memory. But Radiance being forgotten wasn't the same as dying. She begins to reach in the dreams of the bugs through whispers, through images, and through memories. And eventually, the infection, the orange infection that we see throughout the game isn't simple ordinary disease. It's the influence of the Radiance. She was trying to return. She was trying to make the bugs remember her. And more the infection spread, the more Hallownest begins to collapse. The Pale King realized that the kingdom was facing an enemy he simply couldn't fight with soldiers. So he came up with the plan. And this plan became the greatest tragedy of Hallownest's history. Pale King needed something that could contain the Radiance, something with no mind, no desires, no emotions, nothing. Something that Radiance couldn't manipulate. And so, the Pale King created a vessel. With the help of White Lady, Pale King produced countless children, but they weren't ordinary children. They were taken to the abyss, a dark place with ancient power known as Void. Void is nothing but the darkness power. The children were exposed to the void, and most of them were discarded. Thousands of little shells left behind the darkness because of the Pale King required one perfect vessel. A being with no mind to think, no will to break, no voice to cry to suffering. A perfect container for the Radiance. Eventually, Pale King found what he believed was that vessel. One child was chosen. and the child was taken from the abyss, and the child became known as the Hollow Knight. The Pale King raised the Hollow Knight. He prepared it for the purpose, and eventually the Hollow Knight was placed inside a black egg. The Radiance was sealed with it. The three dreamers, Moon, Lauren, and Hera, gave themselves to eternal sleep to protect the seal for a while, and it worked. The infection disappeared. The Hallownest was saved. Or at least they thought so. Pale King thought that it was saved. There was just one problem. Hollow Knight wasn't truly hollow. The Pale King that believed that raising a vessel he created, he could create a completely entire container, but the moment he raised the child, he may already have ruined the experiment, because the Hollow Knight developed a connection with the creator. It had given something that a true vessel never was supposed to have, an idea, and a tiny imperfection was enough. Eventually, the Radiance began to break through. The infection returned. The Hollow Knight begins to suffer. The seal was weakened, and the kingdom collapsed. The Pale King disappeared. His palace vanished. The citizen became infected. The great warriors were gone. The once magnificent kingdom became the ruined world that we would explore in game. And the Hollow Knight, it remained trapped inside the black egg, still containing the Radiance, still suffering for 1,000 years. But there was one more vessel that had escaped the abyss, one that would eventually return. And that vessel was the knight that we play as. The knight simply walks into the abandoned town of Dirtmouth and begins descending in the Hallownest. But as we explore deeper, we discover the truth. The knight is another vessel, another child of the Pale King and the White Lady, another being born in the abyss, another child that was supposed to become the weapon against the Radiance. The knight isn't a random warrior, it is a part of the same family as the Hollow Knight, and it completely changes the meaning of the journey. The knight isn't simply exploring the abandoned kingdom. It's returning to the palace where its entire existence began. And the knight travels deeper and truly slowly reveals itself. Three beings stands between the knight and the black egg. These are the dreamers. The Mon the teacher, the Lorien the watcher, and the Hera the beast. These willingly enter the eternal sleep to protect the Hollow Knight. Each become the part of the seal and eventually must be confronted. But Hera has an important connection. She was the queen of the Spider tribe in the Deepnest, and she had a child with the Pale King, and that child was Hornet. This is why Hornet is so important. She isn't a mysterious warrior who keeps appearing through the night journey. She is directly connected to the history of Hallownest. And unlike the knight, Hornet wasn't created to be a vessel. She had her own identity. She had her own thoughts. She had her own purpose. That's why Hornet is repeatedly challenges the knight, and he wants to know that strange little vessel is actually capable of doing what is needed to be done. The knight continues deeper into the Hallownest. It travels through Green Path, the City of Tears, the Crystal Peak, the Deepnest, the Ancient Basin, and eventually the Abyss. This is where the knight learns about its truth about its past. 1,000 vessels were created, and Knight was one of them. and thousands were thrown in the abyss. Their empty shells remain there, a horrifying reminder of the Pale Knight's plan. The knight realizes that it was one of them, and then comes the most important revelation in the entire game. The knight isn't simply trying to defeat the Hollow Knight, it was confronting its own sibling. The Hollow Knight was chosen. The knight wasn't. He was actually a failure. The Hollow Knight was taken from the abyss. The knight was left behind, and yet the discarded vessel returned. Now the knight has a choice. It can replace the Hollow Knight, or it can continue the cycle, or it can attempt to end it. Eventually, Knight defeats the three dreamers. The seal protecting the black egg disappears, and the knight enters inside the Hollow Knight. After thousands of years, two siblings finally met. The Hollow Knight is no longer the perfect vessel for the Pale King as imagined. He is infected. He is suffering. And during the battle, the Hollow Knight sometimes attacks itself. It stabs its own body. It is almost if some part of it wants the knight what it cannot. And that's when the story becomes much more tragic. The Hollow Knight isn't simply the final boss. It's a victim. A child that was sacrificed for the kingdom. A being forced to contain something it never was meant to contain. And now, the knight decided what happens next. These are the endings of the Hollow Knight. Number 1 ending, the knight becomes the vessel. If the knight defeats the Hollow Knight without uncovering the deeper truth, the knight takes its place and the infection remains sealed. The knight becomes the new vessel. The black egg closes and the cycle continues. The kingdom hasn't truly been saved. The problem has been simply passed from one vessel to another. It is a victory, but a tragic one. Ending number 2. Sealed siblings. If Hornet appears during the final battle. If the Hornet involves in final battle, the ending changes. The knight becomes the new vessel, but the Hornet was sealed inside the black egg as well. Once again, the cycle continues. The problems has been contained but not truly destroyed. Ending number 3. Dream no more. But there is another possibility that can happen. The knight can awaken the dream nail and discover what lies beyond the Hollow Knight. The knight enters its dream and finally sees the true enemy. That was the Radiance. So the forgotten god responsible for the infection. This is the real final battle. Not against the Hollow Knight, but against that god. But against that being that caused the entire catastrophe. Knight fights the Radiance. And eventually the void rises. The Radiance is destroyed. And the infection ends. And Hollow Knight finally releases itself from suffering. For the first time, the cycle has been broken and the knight dies. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give a big fat like, share this video, comment and tell me in the comments what are your thoughts on this video. So I will see you in the next video, and as always, game on!